Welcome everybody to my latest video. So for this video, I'm actually reshooting and redoing a very old video of mine. If you're a longtime subscriber, you may recognize the subject of this video. However, I decided to do a new video basically because the original used some old footage. It had I used a camera that's now obsolete, and it just wasn't very good quality. Now, what I'm going to be talking about is Jamma and how it relates to your arcade cabinets. First thing you need to know, if you consider yourself a pro at collecting arcade cabinets, if you do your own repairs and you know the ins and outs, you know the names of every single tiny component there is to know, and you're just a badass at this hobby, this video is not for you. This video is basic child's play. As with most of my videos, anytime I try and teach someone about something, my videos are intended for the person who's just now getting into collecting arcade cabinets. So they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the tools, they don't have, the advantage that some of the long-time collectors have. So, you long-timers, this video is child's play. You know the stuff inside and out. So, let's get to it. If you're thinking about collecting arcade cabinets, chances are you've come across the term Jamma, and you're not quite sure what it means or how it relates to your arcade cabinet. Now here's the thing. Jamma actually stands for Japan Amusement Machine and Marketing Association. Okay, so what does it have to do with your arcade cabinet? Well, back when, arcades first started to get popular, every company had their own wiring for the arcade cabinet. And the wiring was basically, the cabinets, the games would come with a manual. It'd give you a blueprint of how to connect wire 1 to the speaker, how to connect wire 2 to your PCB board, etc. Now that was all fine and dandy, but the problem came with arcade operators. And when you have an arcade, and what I mean, a facility where you have arcade cabinets for people to play, each square foot of that facility is real estate. And what it comes down to is each arcade cabinet needs to make you a bare minimum amount of money in order for you to stay in business. Now, of course, the more popular games can make up in terms of dollars for the least popular games. But the fact of the matter is, you gotta make sure that what you have for your consumer is actually what they want. So, a game like Pac-Man, which was very, very popular, and Miss Pac-Man, that would bring in tons and tons of dollars. It might be next to some other cabinet that brings in a couple bucks a week at most. Now, as I was saying, all these companies, they had their own method of wiring. The problem was you couldn't take a Miss Pac-Man board and put it inside a Nintendo Donkey Kong cabinet. You couldn't take a Galaga board and put it inside a Popeye cabinet. So anytime an operator wanted a new game, they had to buy a whole new cabinet and it'd take up a lot of real estate. Then along came Jamma. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of who started it and where and when and why, but Jamma is an overall method of wiring. Think of it that way. And when you have a Jamma cabinet, if you have a Jamma PCB, it's as simple as plug and play. So, what you would have is this right here. This is your Jamma Harness. And it rests inside your Jamma cabinet. Pretty simple. You would open up your cabinet, get your Jamma Harness, get your Jamma game, and you would just plug it in like so. Flip it on, and for the most part, you're ready to go. Now, I always recommend possibly checking the voltages just to make sure, but I've never really had to change the voltages when going from one Jamma game to another. That's just my experience. But yeah, you pop in your Jamma PCB in your Jamma arcade cabinet, close it up, power it on, you're ready to go. You get tired of that game, open it up, take out your current Jamma PCB, and then you would install your new Jamma PCB. So this game right here is WrestleFest. This is Jamma compatible, and it can be played in a Jamma cabinet. And this game, I think, is Sunset Riders, and it's also Jamma compatible. So you take out one, put in the other, you're ready to go. Now you're probably asking about games like Street Fighter. I'll get to that in a minute. Here's a common note. Jamma, for the most part, refers to games that only use 3 buttons per player at most. So when you have a game like Street Fighter, or I should say the Street Fighter 2 series, Street Fighter 2 series and the Street Fighter 3 series, those are Jamma Plus. I'll get to that in a minute. So, you got everything connected, and you want to know what the purpose of your Jamma harness is. Well, your Jamma harness connects everything together. I did say this in my original video. Think of your Jamma harness as the bloodstream supply of the human body. Your bloodstream connects blood to your feet, your legs, your arms, your head, your fingers, etc. A Jamma harness connects everything to everything within the arcade cabinet. Each one of these wires goes to something specific. For example, there's ground wires. You'll have another wire that is specific for player 1, button number 1. You'll have another wire that's specific for player 2, button number 1. You got your voltages, you got your colors, your speakers, your coin counters, etc. Now, where can you get a Jamma harness? Well, eBay, pretty much any place that sells components. I guess I shouldn't say any place. Just look up arcade Jamma harness, Twisted Quarter, eBay. You can even find them on Amazon. Now, you're probably wondering, when it comes to a Jamma harness, and you're looking and you see there's a variety of prices. They range from $10 to $50. And you're probably wondering, well, what's the difference? For the most part, they are the same. I've never had to, specifically purchase the more expensive one. I purchased the cheap $10 ones, and I've had no problem. Now, if you ask the pros and longtime collectors, they'll always say, go for the more expensive. It's much better quality. And yes, quality can be better, but to get the job done, I've gone with the cheap ones, especially if it's a cabinet I know I'm going to sell. Just because, save some money. But you do you. Now, what I would recommend is buying a Jamma harness that actually has each wire labeled. And you can look right here. Ground, or starting from the left, ground, positive 5, negative 5, positive 12, key, coin counter 1, lockout speaker plus, not used, video red, blue, blah, 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 blah. Now, when you got your Jamma harness, there's the part side, and on the back, there's the solder side. Is that solder? Depends on who you ask, depending on how it's said. So, yeah, harnesses, they can come with these little labels. I always recommend getting that so you know what goes to what. But you can see we got ground, player 1 down, left, right. Now, on the opposite side, this right here, this is for your monitor. That's a completely different video. But the end of the basic wires, up, down, 1, 2, and 3, the ends look like this. They're little connectors. And this one is black. And when dealing with a Jamma harness, black is always ground. This orange one, well, let's see. What could that orange one be? That looks to be player 1 down. So, yeah, there you go. Now, how do you connect those buttons, or how do you connect the wires to your buttons? When you're dealing with a Jamma cab, there's two types of buttons you're going to come across. Concave, which is what most American cabinets have. Convex. This is more Japanese style. Which one is better? That's for you to decide. I can go with either one. If I'm playing a Mortal Kombat game, I kind of like concave. Street Fighter games, I could go either. My cabinet has concave, yet I'm playing the crappy Street Fighter 30th anniversary online using convex. Now, how do the wires attach to these? Side note, I could tell this is probably going to be a longer video than I anticipated. Well, as I told you, they got these connectors. And at the end of the buttons, American style, you have these little micro switches. And what happens is, let's see, you can see when you push this button down, a part of it is actually hitting this switch right here. And that's what allows your character to do the animation they're supposed to do. So you got this connected in your cabinet like this. This one is the ground. Whereas this one right here will be the colored wire. Now you're thinking, okay, well, I have Japanese cabinets. And they have buttons, and on the bottom, they look like this. Well, it's the same difference. One of these, you connect the ground. The other one, you connect the colored wire. And you're good to go. That's how it works. Now you're thinking, well, what about the joysticks? The joystick is exactly the same. Here, you have an American-style joystick. I actually prefer these joysticks for most American games. The only fighting games I really care for this, or that I like for American-style sticks, for the most part, Mortal Kombat. Now, American-style sticks look like this on the bottom. And you can see when you move your joystick, it moves and it clicks depending on which. It'll click a cherry switch depending on your motion. So it acts the exact same way as a button. In fact, there are special controllers that do not have joysticks. Instead, to move the characters in your fighting game, they have buttons. And that's because it's the exact same concept. Okay, so now you're thinking, well, I have a Japanese joystick. And the Japanese joysticks, the one I have, doesn't have these. What's going on? Or you may be saying, the joystick I have has these, but they don't seem to be able, I can't connect them to my Jamma Harness. Well, that's because your Japanese joystick looks like this. Now, does it use these? Yes. However, it's a little bit different. So let me go ahead and take this off. Do it off camera. See, it's the exact same concept. But you're thinking, well, where do I connect the wires? Well, you connect the wires right here. These come with a harness, which gets connected into here, like so. And at the end of the harness, you got your buttons. And black, of course, will be ground. And then you just have to link up the correct wires with player 1 or player 2. Up, down, left, right. Cut, twist, tape, you're ready to go. You can get more technical by soldering, but, you do what's best for you. So with that in mind, you can now see how this Jamma harness connects everything together. Now, I don't have spare speakers with me, but your Jamma harness connects. It'll take sound from your game to your speakers. It'll take the motion inputs from your buttons or joystick to your PCB game. It'll take video from the game and to your monitor. So it's a very, very important piece of your arcade cabinet. In fact, it's probably one of the most important pieces. The reason being, even if your monitor goes out, you can, unfortunately nowadays, replace it with an HD TV. But if you have a faulty harness, you can't play anything. So, now you're thinking, well, okay, I understand. A Jamma harness is for connecting Jamma arcade cabinets to an arcade cab that has 1 or 2 players. Well, what about games that have 4 players or games that have more than 3 buttons? Well, now we come into a little, what I like to call Jamma Plus in some cases. Now, before we get into that, there are some games which use more than 3 buttons, and they only use a Jamma harness. And you can see right here, the harness, player 1, button 1, 2, 3, and then you got button 4, 5, and 6. And you can see that second to the last wire acts as both ground and a button 6. So it really depends on the game itself. And a lot of the games that use more than 3 buttons with a Jamma harness tend to be bootleg games. The exception is Neo Geo stuff, but Neo Geo doesn't use Jamma per se. In fact, if you have a multi-Neo Geo motherboard, do not plug it into a Jamma cabinet. And vice versa. Alright. So let's first start with games that use more than 2 players. Those are games like X-Men, Sunset Riders, Cowboys of Moo Mesa, G.I. Joe, although I'm not sure if G.I. Joe is Jamma or not, can't remember. So, what happens in that case? Well, that's where Jamma extension harnesses come in. Or excuse me, Jamma multiplayer harnesses, or player 3 harness, player 4 harness. Now what happens is, in this game, this is Sunset Riders. In order to put this in a 4-player cabinet, there's a harness that goes here and here. And then this you connect to your player 3 and 4 start button, joysticks, and buttons. That's how it works. The game still supplies the power to those functions, and of course the game gets the power from your Jamma harness, which part of your Jamma harness is hooked up to your power supply, your buttons, your monitor, everything of the sort. Alright. Now, I might as well use the same board. When you have a game that is Jamma Plus, and let's just think of the Street Fighter 2 series, whether it's Street Fighter 2 or Grandmaster Challenge, or even the CPS 2 stuff like Street Fighter Alpha 3. If you put those games in a Jamma cabinet with just a Jamma harness, can you play it? Yes. However, buttons 1, 2, and 3 will be the only buttons you can use for players 1 and 2. So you're asking, well, what about buttons 4, 5, and 6, the kick buttons? Again, we come into extra harnesses, which in this case they're called kick harnesses. And you find somewhere on the PCB, you insert the kick harness, and then it's the same concept. A ground wire plus the functioning wires for buttons 4, 5, and 6. So, there you go. Not sure if I went over everything. Hopefully I did. This video's going longer than I anticipated, so I'm going to cut it short. Hopefully you got the information you need. If you have any questions, let me know. And, yeah, until next time.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game